It has been a week. So I recorded a couple of weeks ago my kind of October outro, November intro, and then I got sick. I got really sick. I couldn't move my jaw whatsoever. Whenever I had to speak, it looked like I was doing a really bad sort of Clint Eastwood impression. So all the plans got absolutely nixed. I'm here instead. Hello. So in place of all those kind of well-scripted, collaborative plans I had that I had to cancel or postpone, today we're going to talk about 1 stars. I was watching a live stream between Tori Tekken and Preacher from Preacher Reads about a week and a half ago, and they were talking about 1-star reviews, and they were talking about the fact that they generally never give 1 stars unless something's really gone wrong with a book. And I'm the same. Listen, on this channel I don't even give star ratings, but I do have a Goodreads. I've had a Goodreads account for about 10 years, and even on there I don't tend to upload star ratings. If I do tend to upload a star rating on Goodreads, it's because the book has really done something excellent, or it's really annoyed me. And I thought today I'd go through my Goodreads of the last 10 years and tell you about some of those books that have really ticked me off. So that's all we're going to do today. I am going to run down this list of 1-star, 2-star Goodreads ratings, explain to you why, if I know why, some of these it's been a while, and we'll go from there. So the first book that I've given a 1-star rating in my historical Goodreads is Gadsby by Ernest Vincent Wright. Now this book was written in, I believe, 1939, sometime in the 1930s. It's a 50,000 word novel, and here's the gimmick, that never ever uses the letter E. Now I could try and emulate this for the purposes of this micro review. I just think that this book is rubbish. Well, there we go. Easier than it looks. So yeah, this entire novel is 50,000 words, never uses the letter E. As a party trick, as a gimmick, it's kind of interesting. As a novel, oh, it falls flat on its face. It's so boring. Ooh. The premise of this novel is that you have this man called Gadsby who returns to his hometown, find out it's in a bit of disrepair, and employs the youth to make this city better. And the novel is just all about all the different things the youth do to improve the city until, spoiler alert, Gadsby becomes mayor and the town is thriving and bustling. It is cardboard. It's so dull. Okay, yeah, there is some interesting dynamic to it, like having this novel that never uses the letter E. It is a challenge, and to sustain it over 50,000 words is an interesting challenge. Nevertheless, the novel I would rather eat than reread. I think there are interesting texts that play with what a novel can do. I've spoken about that previously on my channel. This is not one of them. This one goes straight in the wood chipper without regrets or tears. The next one I want to talk about is Sandman by Neil Gaiman. And I don't want to talk about this one too much because I don't want to talk about Neil Gaiman too much, but I do think that this deserves special attention. Very specifically, I want to talk about volume 9 of Sandman, The Kindly Ones. So again, I don't want to talk about Neil Gaiman too much for the purposes of this video. What I do want to tell you is that in the introduction to volume 9, The Kindly Ones of Sandman, the penultimate volume, the ending is spoiled by the person who wrote this introduction. Literally, I'm not going to tell you what happens. You open it up on the first page, in basically the first paragraph, bam. And that's the last 500 pages of this experience completely sullied. Can you imagine reading, right, what can I spoil here? The Bible. The Sixth Sense. Right, let's spoil The Sixth Sense. That one's very famous for being a big spoiler that everyone knows. Can you imagine getting 2/3 of the way through watching The Sixth Sense, and then suddenly there's a cut, and then someone walks on stage and goes, "He was a ghost the entire time, guys. Bye." That's what happens with Volume 9 of Sandman. I could not believe that someone made this artistic decision. Someone did make this artistic decision. A bunch of people approved it. I have absolutely no idea what happened there. I stand by that 1 star. Okay, number 3 that I've given a 1 star to, and I remember this very clearly, is The Spy Who Loved Me by Ian Fleming, one of the James Bond novels. Now, by itself, this is not a particularly strong James Bond novel. It's told through the perspective of one of the Bond girls' POVs, which is an interesting decision and could actually be a really fascinating novel. I mean, you know, the Bond novels and the Bond movies are constantly accused of being misogynistic, and to be honest, most of the time rightfully so. So there's a really interesting dynamic there. What is it like to see Bond through the lens of one of these women? I'm just gonna, at this point in the video, just put up the quotation on the screen that made me look at this novel, go, absolutely not, and walk away from it. It's like Fleming and all the people who love Bond, when I see this accusation of misogyny, and I'm going to dig deeper into it. It's absolutely wild. So I gave that a 1 star. Quotation is here, and that's, you could argue that I'm decontextualizing the thing, and I would argue that yes, I am, but nevertheless, there is no real context to burrow into there. It's not great. It's not great. I mean, it's very rare. Usually when there's a bad line or a bad paragraph or a bad section of a book, I do try and step back and go, listen, this is one cog in the machine. You should be reviewing the machine, not the cog. But sometimes when the cog is made of flippin' cyanide, there's only so much you can do. Now, here's an interesting one, and it's one that I wouldn't particularly stand by anymore, which is that apparently, according to my Goodreads, the first time I read The Black Company by Glen, I gave it 2 stars. And I'm wondering why. You know, the first time I read The Black Company was about 10 years ago, and I read it on a plane. I just finished my year in the States, I was travelling around, and I was flying back to Scotland, and I had my 300-page edition of The Black Company. Maybe I just read it at the wrong time. Maybe I read it coming off the heels of a much bigger, broader fantasy book. You know, The Black Company as a novel is very small, and it's very fast, and it's very blunt, and the writing style is very staccato. And I wonder, just looking at this just literal star rating, I wonder if what happened there is that I was expecting some big, immersive, floral fantasy story, not realizing what I was getting in for, and punishing the novel based on that reading experience that I was expecting, rather than the experience that the novel wanted to give me. So actually, you know what? I'm just going to remove that star rating. I mean, I'm quibbling with just deleting my Goodreads anyway, but for now, Glen, mate, you don't deserve that. You don't deserve that. Oh, I just accidentally gave it a 1 star. I've got this watermark on me. That's what happens when you give your daughter a shower and then she cuddles you. I'm going to wear it. I'm going to wear it like a badge of honor. Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is Battle Royale by Koshun Takami, which apparently I read in May 17th, 2015, is the date I've marked as having finished it. So if this star rating is erroneous, don't blame me, because apparently every 10 years your body, all the cells in your body get swapped out with new cells. So don't blame me, blame the old guy. Nevertheless, I do remember why I gave this novel a bit more of a poor star rating than I was expecting. And it wasn't really due to the plot whatsoever. I mean, the plot was kind of standard death game fare. You watch the number of people left trickling down until there's 1 or 2 or 3 left or what have you. What I found frustrating about this novel was the translation that I read. And this was before I moved to Japan or anything like that. Had no aspirations to move to Japan. I just found the translation of this novel really dodgy, and some really quirky translational decisions that really took me out of the reading experience. I want to say like every page. You had stuff like, let's say a bullet was flying past a character's ear. The bullet whizzed 3.5 inches from our protagonist's ear. Why? Who's doing the maths? Who has the ruler? Madness. So that really got in the way of this reading experience. Now, looking at it again, I'm not sure if a 2 star is justified based on the merits of a translation. And I think this opens up a whole new sea of ideas and issues, right? When you're reviewing a text, especially if you're giving it a star rating, do you give it a star rating based on the actual story? Or do you factor the translation into that star rating? I guess you could have the same discussion with audiobooks, right? If you're listening to a story, does the performance of the narrator impact your overall grade if you are giving a letter grade or a star rating or things like that? I have no idea today, but 10 years ago I clearly thought it did. So there you go. Next, I've got 3 Stephen Kings in the 1 or 2 star rating, and I'll whiz through these a little bit faster because I have talked about them previously. The first one is Under the Dome, which I stand by as being a pretty lousy novel. I was so looking forward to reading Under the Dome. I remember very clearly I was saving it. I had it on the shelf for months. You know, I'm going to wait till a good holiday. I'm going to wait till I have time to give this book the justice it deserves. And I did. I took it on holiday to Korea, opened it up, very excited, thought I was going to get an experience like It or The Stand or even something like Dreamcatcher, which is a wonky novel but still good fun. And I was just so bored by this novel. I was so bored by Under the Dome. Nothing much really happens. I mean, you could argue that's kind of the point. It's a pressure cooker, right? So the premise, forgive me, of Under the Dome, if you're not aware, is that a big kind of orb falls over a town somewhere in Maine. It's usually in Maine. I think it's in Maine. And it's all about the characters who are inside this village, working out what's going on, contending with the antagonists who are in this small town arena, and trying to work out if there's any way to survive or to get out of this dome. But to be honest, I didn't find the slow build-up in this novel that interesting. And I never really did, and my interest waned as the pages and pages went on. And it is a long novel. I believe it's 800, 900 pages, depending on your edition. Could have been an interesting 400-page experiment, but as it stands, I was just wanting it over, and I was wanting it over by about the halfway mark. I need to get better at DNFing, to be honest. The other two I apparently was annoyed enough to give a star rating to. One is From a Buick 8, which is boring. Even more boring than Under the Dome. Yeah, I'd rather read Under the Dome than From a Buick 8 again. And From a Buick 8 is about a third of the length of Under the Dome. So Stephen King has written, apparently, a really good novel about a car that comes alive and can threaten the populace surrounding the car. And that novel is called Christine. And I've not read Christine, but I did read From a Buick 8. And the car just kind of sits in the garage and people talk about the car. That's it. And you could argue this isn't really a novel about the car, just in the same way The Shining isn't really about a haunted hotel. But oh my goodness, this novel languishes. It just the car sits in the garage, and it's a police station. The policemen talk about it. There's also a young protagonist who's coming to terms with the death of his father, and there's lots of kind of fatherly conversations going on there. Nah. I don't even have anything better to say about it. You know, sometimes with critique, you need something to critique. And I just felt like with From a Buick 8, there was so little to critique. Everything felt so thin that there wasn't much to talk about at all. It's such a watery novel. So in some ways, I'm struggling to come up with stuff to talk about here. And I don't think that's the passage of time. When did I finish it? Hang on, 2020. So 5 years ago. I remember most of the plot. What plot there is? Nah, moving on. I stand by that decision. So the last Stephen King book that I was clearly annoyed enough by to give a star rating to was Rage, by Stephen King / Richard Bachman, because Stephen King had this alternate writer persona, this pseudonym called Richard Bachman, and he wrote a lot of his younger, kind of bleak, more nihilistic, arguably, works under the guise of Richard Bachman. So The Running Man, The Long Walk, Thinner. All these books were written by Richard Bachman, Stephen King under this persona, as was Rage. Now, if you know anything about Rage, you'll know that it's been taken out of publication. You're not going to find it in Waterstones. You're not going to find it in Barnes & Noble. Stephen King himself has taken it off the shelves and said, this is not going to be part of my kind of mainstream bibliography anymore. And that's because the novel is from the perspective of a school shooter, the first-person perspective, and I believe it begins with him basically walking into school and taking his teacher out. Now, I am not from a culture where gun violence is particularly prevalent. And I can understand why some people would have an immediate revulsion to this novel, even if it did what it's trying to do very well. Just purely based on premise, I can totally understand why you would not want to feed into this type of story and just put it to one side. Be that as it may, I just don't think that this novel is very good. Even if the premise was particularly glorious. I think that main character, his voice, it's just cringy and needlessly aggressive and holier than thou. And I get that that's kind of the point, is that you don't want to have a truly kind of sympathetic persona here. Nails on a chalkboard. Do you know, there's a lot of flippant jokes I could make about, what I would want to do with his character, and I'm not going to, because of how dark the premise is and how it's genuinely upsetting for most people. But I'll leave that there. Like Rage, if you're a Stephen King completionist and you're looking at it and you want to find a copy out of idle or OCD curiosity because you feel like you have to get through Stephen King's backlog, I do sympathise with that in a lot of ways. Let me tell you, there's not much meat on the bones here. You're not missing much, genuinely. And you know what? I think Stephen King himself would agree. Right, I believe we're on number 9. I'm going to keep this to 10 for now. This one definitely deserves a bit of a lambasting, though. And you know what? Hang on, how do I pronounce this author's name? Give me a second. Chuck. Google tells me Chuck Palahniuk, author of Fight Club, is who I'm talking about right now. Now, Chuck Palahniuk, flippin' literary genius sometimes. I mean, the man wrote Fight Club, and Fight Club... Oh my goodness, I seem like such a... Oh, do I want to? Do I want to be that kind of white middle-class guy who talks about how much he loves Fight Club? Do I want to? I like House of Leaves too. Anyway, I think Fight Club is a really good book. And I think he's got other good books too. Rant, I think, is a brilliant, brilliant book. I don't want to give anything away, but it's mental. If you've ever gone down the Chuck Palahniuk rabbit hole, you'll know that he has some pretty awful stuff too. So I won't talk about this one very much because my memory is quite patchy, but the one I've given 1 star here is Damned, which is about a main character called Madison who descends into hell having died, I believe, from a marijuana overdose is the premise. I understand the novel is supposed to be kind of funny, kind of slapstick, humorous, not necessarily going for great depth, which is fine. And I don't really believe myself to be a particularly humorless, although some people might disagree. My students will certainly disagree. Humorless, prudish human being. I mean, I adore Dungeon Crawler Carl, which has a lot of the same types of humor. I just feel like it didn't really land here at all. I was just going through page after page of jokes that are kind of rolling my eyes and flipping the page and maybe once or twice going, ha. Not a ha, not a ha, ha. And the book is about 200, I'm looking at it now, 247 pages long, which is about 249 pages too many. This book should be minus 2 pages long. You've heard it here first. Not very good. So at the end of this, we're going to come back to Preacher Reads for my 10th book that I think is dreadful, because Preacher asked me a few months ago, and I did it. He asked me to participate in one of these collaborative videos, and the topic was a book that is less than 3.85 on Goodreads, which you believe is very much worth reading. I have a chopstick in my hand, forgive me. I chose The Mezzanine by Nicholson Baker, which I stand by as being this brilliant little novel. It's 100 pages long. It's about a man coming back from his lunch break and riding an escalator back to his desk. That's it. The whole novel is just his thought process, and it's this brilliant encapsulation of life and what it's like to be alive and all the little small quirks of everyday thought and speech that make life so brilliant and vibrant and amazing. Nicholson Baker also wrote a book called House of Holes, which is the most dreadful book I've ever read in my life. Oh my goodness. So what happened was I finished The Mezzanine and I thought, hey, new favourite author here. I'm going to buy everything by this guy. So I didn't even look at the premise. I just ordered House of Holes, bought it, opened it up, read it in one sitting, and threw up afterwards. You could argue that House of Holes does exactly what it's intending to do, because what it's trying to do is take the premise of Alice in Wonderland, a portal to a magical otherworld, and what if the magical otherworld caters to, how can I say this, the basest, most lustful desires of the human heart? What if that's on the other side of the Alice in Wonderland portal? And I think what Baker is trying to do is trying to point out how actually when you get everything you want, it all becomes very grey and stale and lifeless. It's so bad. It's so bad. Oh my goodness. It's so dreadful. And again, maybe purposefully dreadful, but every single page, I would turn the page and I would look away. I would try to find some kind of excuse so that I didn't have to continue with this novel. And I had to really try to train my eye back on the page to get this thing done. I enjoyed this novel so little that when I finished it, normally, I mean, here are your options, right? Put it on the bookshelf, give it to a friend, donate it to a charity shop or library. I finished House of Holes, forgive me everybody, and it went in the paper recycling. I did not want to have this book anymore. I did not want to give this book to anybody. I did not want anybody to even know that I'd read this book. Don't know why I put it on my Goodreads. With each of these novels that I've talked about today, each of them do kind of have some merit. There might be someone who would enjoy reading them. So, for example, Stephen King, all those books, even Rage, if you're a Stephen King aficionado, I would not tell you to not read them. Battle Royale, I just think I had a bad time with the translation. The story is fine. If there's been an updated translation, go ahead and enjoy yourself. I cannot think of a single person who should read House of Holes. And again, maybe that's the point. And if so, Nicholson Baker, job well done. Thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for especially bearing with me, given how awful this week has been. Very much looking forward to making more videos in the coming weeks. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.